I'd like to introduce Adam Brown, who probably doesn't really need introducing to most of you, because Adam is the lead on the local nature recovery strategy and has spent, I think, the last, I don't know, is it nearly 2 years? Probably seems like 10, but so the last nearly 2 years working on the local nature recovery strategy and, as we call it, Surrey Nature Recovery in general. So I will now hand over to him and I will disappear for the moment. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, as Lee said, I'm Adam. I think I've met most of you at some point over the past couple of years, but for those I haven't. I work for Surrey County Council, and yeah, principally been working on the development of the local nature recovery strategy. So today we going to go through a couple of bits. We're in an exciting moment now where we are out to public consultation with our draft strategy. So I'll briefly go through what a local nature recovery strategy is, just to remind us all. I live and breathe this every day, but I understand it's probably a minor part of most of your lives. And then I'll go through the engagement and mapping process and methods that we've undergone over the past year and a half. And then I'll talk about the draft strategy, take you through the online interactive map and how to use it. And then we'll talk about sort of what potential implications are for landowners and land managers moving forward following publication. So just briefly, the policy context in which the LNRS sits. Obviously, there's been a lot of movement over the past sort of 10 years or so, starting with kicked off by the 25-year plan for the environment, and then consolidated in the Environment Act 2021, and then again in the Environment Plan 2023. Amongst all these documents and a couple of other commitments the government have made, there is a whole host of large targets that we are meant to be achieving as a nation. So triple SIs, or sites of specific scientific interest, we want 75% of them to be in favourable condition. As a country, that's down at about 37% at the moment, although Surrey is actually up around 75% already. There's 260,000 hectares of increased woodland cover, and that doesn't just include woodland blocks, that also includes trees outside of woodland as well. So that's total canopy cover, which is a slightly different metric to the one originally proposed. 500,000 hectares of new semi-rich, nature-rich habitat. So that's looking at heathlands and grasslands and peatlands, where we can restore and recreate them. And then 45,000 miles of restored or new hedgerows, which is a pretty massive target. But the big headline one, which we agreed to at the Global Biodiversity Framework in Canada, was 30% of land and sea protected for nature by 2030. And there we are still waiting really for a final policy paper on what that looks like in terms of how we get there. As it stands at the moment, the Wildlife and Countryside Link annual report says that we are at about 8.5% technically, if you look at our designated land, but with most of that, obviously 37% of our triple SIs being in favourable condition, actually functionally good quality habitat, we're down at about 3.5–4%. So we are quite a way off our 30% target. So one of the ways to solve that, local nature recovery strategies. They were introduced in the Environment Act 2021 alongside biodiversity net gain, and the land use framework and a few other policies. So these are a new spatial or mapped strategy that will identify locations or create or improve habitat. There are 48 of local nature recovery strategies that are being developed across the country, across England, and then once they are all produced, they'll be knitted together into one nice singular nature recovery network, which will be available for everyone to view. And yes, so we were given quite specific guidance to follow by Natural England. And this is sort of the core flow chart that we followed. You can ignore step 2 because that is for when we review the local nature recovery strategies in the future. But we've largely undergone this process, and each of these steps had sort of statutory and non-statutory guidance that we have been following. So this sort of thing has been done before. Not quite exactly the same, but I think many people are aware of or familiar with biodiversity opportunity areas. And they are quite large sections of the county that have been mapped for biodiversity opportunity areas, but they also, the sort of major difference between that and what we're doing with the LNRS is sort of how specific we are being in what we've mapped. And so the BOAs are quite large mapped blobs, whereas the LNRS is very much targeted at a field level. The other big difference is the LNRS is underpinned by legislation. BOAs were just a sort of a policy tool, whereas these are a statutory, LNRS are a statutory tool, and they are required to be produced. They are also required to be reviewed on a 3 to 10 year cycle. That 3 to 10 years is decided by the Secretary of State, so they'll inform us at some point within that time frame of when we want to review the LNRS. So it's definitely going to be looked at again, and that's when the part 2 comes in, where we will review and sort of look at our progress against this existing LNRS in terms of what nature recovery has been delivered across the county. There's also a tie-in into the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which specifically notes that the LNRS, all sort of strategic plans need to take account of the LNRS in their creations. That includes local plans, neighbourhood plans, and minerals and wastes plans, and that will also include the new spatial development strategies, or the SDSs, that are coming out of devolution and local government reorganisation. The other thing that's slightly different is since those BOAs are produced, is there's been a lot of movement in the ecosystem service space, or natural capital space, or as they've called them for the LNRS, wider environmental benefits. So that's really looking at the key services or benefits that nature provides society, and so that's a whole host of things really, but the ones we've really focused down on are the health and well-being opportunities of access to natural green space, flood mitigation, so where we can use natural flood management to hold back water in the landscape and reduce flooding down further in the catchment, climate mitigation and adaptation, so we've got your sort of basic carbon sequestration opportunities there, but also looking at that adaptation part as well. So given that the climate is changing, how can we do things like reduce urban heat island effect using trees, and again reduce things like flooding or reduce wildfire. And then finally, how we can use nature to improve water quality. I think we're all aware that our rivers are not in a good way, and there are different opportunities we can take using nature-based solutions to improve our water quality. So potential delivery mechanisms, this largely hasn't changed in the past year and a half, which is a bit, so we've got a couple of different ones that we're looking at the moment, and we are now in development with DEFRA as well in terms of how we take the LNRS moving forward, but I'll touch on that a bit more later. So biodiversity net gain is sort of the key relationship and delivery mechanism that local nature recovery strategies have, and sort of will be a key one for landowners and land managers as well. So if you are developing a habitat bank or are looking to sell biodiversity net gain units on your land, if the measure that you are delivering, or the activity that you are delivering, aligns with the local nature recovery strategy map, then you get a 15% uplift in the value of the number of units you produce from that same action. So just doing that same 10 hectares of grassland will get you 15% more units if it aligns with, say, a grassland creation measure that's mapped out in the LNRS, but we'll go through that again later. It's long been touted that there'll be a potential link to the environmental land management scheme, but I think the less said about elms at the moment, the better. Aggregated delivery of environmental benefits. So again, that's looking at where we've included wider environmental benefits. That's looking at not just the nature aspects, but how we can access alternative mechanisms for funding. So natural flood management is the sort of big one that's coming down the road. In terms of how we can sort of use alternative funds or private funds to try and invest in nature recovery. And then locally, we'll be using the LNRS as a delivery mechanism for our enhanced biodiversity duty, which was another thing that came through the Environment Act 2021. So all public bodies now have an enhanced biodiversity duty that they need to deliver. And then equally, as a collective, as the Nature Partnership, will be using the LNRS to direct the projects that we're developing in the future. So in terms of who we are or how it's been developed, the governance side of things, we have had an ongoing steering group. And on that steering group, we have the County Council themselves, but also the Nature Partnership, Natural England, the Record Centre, NFU, CLA, and all those partners mentioned there. Alongside that, there was a supporting authorities group, which is required by the legislation, which is made up of the districts and boroughs across Surrey, as well as Natural England. And so they've been kept in contact throughout the process and have had a chance to feed into the various aspects of development. And then in terms of delivery, we sort of had three main groups that were put together. So there was a species technical group that was led by Mike Waite at the Wildlife Trust, data and mapping technical group, which was myself, and then stakeholder engagement, which was Lisa in the Nature Partnership predominantly. So in terms of where we've got to, this was the sort of early stages. The step one was produce our areas of particular importance for biodiversity, or our baseline map. So this map shows all of the different designations that exist across the county, and that is all of the national and international designations, so the SACs and SBAs and the SSIs and all those lovely acronyms, but then also our local wildlife sites as well, the sites of importance for nature conservation. One thing that is missing from this map, but is on the online map now, is ancient and veteran trees that have come from the ancient tree inventory, as they are noted as an irreplaceable habitat. And equally, that sort of darker green along the south of the county is ancient woodland, which is also considered there as an irreplaceable habitat. So our current baseline is 21% of the county, and that is those designations and those irreplaceable habitats. Relatively, when I speak to our neighbours, that is incredibly high. To the south, it's a fairly similar picture. Hampshire and West Sussex are looking at similar amounts, but if we go sort of north, Oxford, Berkshire, and West, they actually are down in single digits for their baseline. So we're all starting from quite different places on our local nature recovery strategies, and I guess that gives a bit of credence as to why we're doing this sort of geography. When we do look at the statutory designations, and that's sort of those designations that do qualify for the definition of that 30 by 30 target, we're actually only at 7.8% in the county, so we're slightly below the rest of the country in terms of designations, but then quite high above the rest of the county in terms of actual existing habitats. Although we have it, not much of it's currently designated. And so we also sort of took that initial snapshot of the existing habitats across the county. We are the most wooded county. That's touted a lot, 25% woodland currently. And quite a large proportion of that is ancient woodland as well. So 7.2% of the county is ancient woodland, which is incredibly high. The national average for woodland cover is 10%. So again, we're quite a lot higher than the rest of the country. However, when you begin to break that down across the different geographies of the county, it is extremely variable. So down in the southwest in Waverley, with 35% woodland, and then up in the north in Spelthorne, it's down to as low as 3%. So although we are the most wooded county in the country, it's not evenly distributed in any way, shape, or form. So that's really taken informed the way that we think about the various actions in the LNRS. We have a lot of grassland in the county, about 40% modified grassland, but we have very little species-rich grassland. I think there's probably a bit of a call to have that reviewed, and there is a Surrey old grasslands inventory project underway at the moment, because I think we are perhaps undercounting the amount of species-rich grassland we have in the county. But the data sets we had available gave us those sorts of figures. The other thing that makes Surrey stand out is that we do have a very low proportion of agricultural land compared to the rest of the country, of around 35%. It depends on what data sets you look at. So yeah, that compares to a national average of about 69% in England, I think 70 odd across the UK. And again, as mentioned, 74% of our SSIs are in favourable condition. So the habitats we do have do tend to be in fairly good condition as well. So the next stage, once we've done that sort of baselining, was beginning to look at how we develop our priorities and potential measures that will form the sort of core of the local nature recovery strategy. So quickly defining those terms. Priorities is what some of you may call outcomes, but it's the envisaged end result for recovering or enhancing biodiversity. So that's the sort of state of nature we'd like to see at the very end. And then the potential measures are the practical actions that we need to take in order to achieve those priorities. So again, priorities, you may call them outcomes. Potential measures, you may call them actions, depending on what sort of language you want to use. So last year we went through a long engagement process. We started with 8 initial workshops held through May through August, and then also hosted an online survey and undertook a policy review of existing strategies. So that looked at local plans, looked at evidence documents, both national and local, and we pulled out all the sort of relevant nature recovery priorities that already exist. And from that, we produced a wealth of data that really underpinned the sort of beginning scoping of our priorities and measures list. We then tested all of that information against the other criteria, i.e. what we're actually allowed to include. And really it has to relate to restoring, creating and improving habitats, delivering those wider environmental benefits, or directly contribute to the national environment objectives. And actually that's quite restrictive when you look at the sort of actions and discussions that we were having, but I'll cover that a bit more in a second. So following that phase one, we ended up with a draft list of 32 priorities across 5 themes, although in hindsight those 32 were sort of a blend between priorities and measures, but we sorted that out a lot in phase 2. So in phase 2 we held 3 workshops where we tested those 32 priorities across the 5 themes, and reviewed that list, and then also produced a sort of follow-on list of key measures and actions that we'd want to do to achieve those priorities. Following this, the final priorities and measures list was created, and then that was tested through and refined through partners, the steering group, the supporting authorities group, into the final list that we've got today that's out for public consultation. So as mentioned, the limitations, especially through the engagement process, a lot of the discussions we were having were extremely useful and enlightening, but we covered a lot of ground that fell out of scope of the local nature recovery strategy. So there's a lot of sort of societal, economic and behavioural needs and requirements that people wanted that would help improve nature recovery. So there's a lot around improving the base knowledge of nature to try and improve that nature connectedness between people and nature, and that sort of culminated in suggestions for adjustments to the school curriculum, but again, this falls out of scope of the LNRS. And then there was a lot of discussion around the way people behave in nature, so thinking about things like the use of barbecues when it's extremely hot and dry, especially this summer, and the threat of wildfires. And then there was also a lot of discussion, obviously, around stronger enforcement of existing regulations, and obviously thinking about our rivers in that context. Alongside this process, as mentioned, Mike Waite was undertaking a species prioritization process. And so there were started with almost 2,000 species, and he's got that down to 100 species currently. And that list is available in the statement of biodiversity priorities as well. Each of those 100 species does have specific measures and actions that can be taken to help improve them. The main criteria that really gets you down from that almost 2,000 down to 100 is whether the actions that are required to support that species fall out of just improving or better connecting their habitat. So it's those species that really require very specific or bespoke actions in order to improve their conservation status. So where we are at now, as mentioned, the LNRS is out for public consultation and available. It falls into 3 parts. So part 1 is the description of the strategy area, and that really goes through the current state of nature in Surrey, the key threats and opportunities to nature in Surrey, but then also pulls out a couple of key case studies for existing nature recovery action that's ongoing at the moment. And then the slightly more technical document is the statement of biodiversity priorities, and this document has what ended up being 18 priorities split across 5 themes, and then underpinning those was 69 active measures, so sort of practical actions that we can take, and then 28 supporting measures, which I'll explain a bit more in a second. And as mentioned, there's that 100 species, different species within the shortlist as well, and they feature in the statement of biodiversity priorities. So it is formatted into those 5 themes, and then under each chapter, or under each theme, there is a set of general principles. This really reflects some of that conversation we were having in the engagement and different sort of aspects that people brought up that we thought was important to still capture around the way that we undertake nature recovery and the way that we approach nature recovery. So in the wooden one specifically, it's looking at sort of different approaches we might want to take. So looking at natural regeneration came up again and again during our engagement, around the way that tree planting has been happening in the county and across the country, to be fair, where we're seeing sort of tree planting schemes either failing or not succeeding. And so if there are alternative approaches that we can potentially take, and then it falls into the priorities and measures following that. And then, as I say, there's measures, and then there are supporting measures. Supporting measures are sort of those that don't quite meet the criteria, but we felt were fully necessary to be included in the LNRS in order for those priorities to be achieved. So we've got a few there, especially around the economy side of things. And obviously, if there is no money to deliver these actions, then they won't happen. And so thinking about routes to market for things like venison, if we want to undertake proper deer management and things like that. So there's a whole host of supporting measures in there too. And then the sort of core bit to turn this into a spatial strategy. I'll start speeding up a bit. We started mapping our baselines. There was a whole host of different data sets that set out the different habitats across the county. And then working with SPIC and SWT, we sort of amalgamated a lot of those into a single habitat data set, which produced those sort of key figures you saw earlier. But yeah, sort of aligns with what we said. So 25% woodland, without saying, yep, 25%. Total farmland there is 33%, so slightly lower than that original 35% we had earmarked out. And then when you begin to look at the sort of non-woodland semi-natural habitats, the figures get extremely low. So we're looking at 2% of the county. Obviously, there's those have been rounded there. So you've got 4,000 hectares at 2% and 3,000 hectares at 2%. That's actually 2.5% and sort of 1.6%. So they're almost 1% different there. And then, yeah, we see 21% of the county as gardens, amenity, grassland, and urban green space. That includes golf courses and other amenities, sort of improved grassland. And so it does take up quite a lot of the county. We undertook some opportunity and connectivity mapping. So we didn't really have that sort of information that would underpin our decision making from a spatial perspective. So working with Surrey Wildlife Trust, we did that. And yeah, undertook a new spatial data set. And that was really used as a source of the spatial information that underpinned our decision making. We followed a methodology that's been developed by Oxford University under their Agile program that looks at wider environmental benefits and the different ways that we can deliver them, and gives each individual parcel across the county a prioritized habitat type. And it's an incredibly large data set. Was extremely difficult to deal with, but is a massive wealth of information. So we had 68 measures. We only ended up mapping 19 of them onto the map, and there's a whole host of different reasons why. Some of them, the measure is simply just applicable across the county. There wasn't really a decent way of targeting that specific measure. Some of them, the data just doesn't exist in order for us to turn that into a spatial data set yet. Or if it does exist, actually the licensing isn't in a place to allow us to use it properly. So one of the limitations we have is that all the mapping at the end of this, when it gets delivered to Natural England, will become open government license available, so anyone can download and use it. And so if we want to use proprietary data sets, there's an issue there. So something like hedgerows, there is a couple of really useful data sets, but we wouldn't be able to make them open source at the end of this process, and so they weren't able to be fit in there. We're hoping that conversations will happen at a higher level, ready for the next LNRS, to allow us to increase the number of measures we've mapped here. In terms of the percentage of mapped, as mentioned earlier, the APIB covers 21%. The measures map beyond that 80 is about 18%, and then so the total local habitat is 35% local habitat map. So I'm going to quickly stop sharing and go on to the local habitat map to show you it. So this is available for anyone to view. You'll be hit with this splash page, which has a couple of sort of key considerations, not only about using the map, but also those limitations I was just mentioning there. But also a couple of warnings around, obviously, just because something is mapped on here, it does not mean that it is public land or publicly accessible. Yeah, so that's there. And this is the map. It is, yeah, very busy. There is a whole host of layers and a wealth of information on here, and it can seem like quite a lot when you first land, but it is possible to turn off layers and drill down into it. So on the left-hand side, there is a number of different sections and options. So there's the information about the LNRS map itself. a brief user guide that just tells you the basics around zooming in and turning off. And then the sort of key one you want is third down, which is the map layers. And this allows you to turn off and on different layers. So we have the APIB, which is that baseline where there, which is all the different greens. So if you turn that off, they'll disappear. The APIB, which is all of the current measures merged into one single layer in purple. And then the sort of the more interesting part is those APIB, that APIB layer, but split down into specific actions. So this begins to tell you those specific locations across the county where we want to undertake specific action. And as I say, you can zoom in and have a look. This sort of purpley pink stretch across the middle of the county is the chalk ridge, and that is essentially targeting chalk grassland creation across that entire section. But you can zoom in anywhere, and all of these blocks should have a pop-out box you can click on, and it will tell you the potential measure that's been mapped in that location. And again, you can turn each of these measures off individually or as a whole. So we've tried to make this as user-friendly as possible, but we are seeking feedback and comments on this to let us know what improvements we can make. I think there's definitely improvements that we need to make on the symbology and the colors we're using, but there are so many different data layers that it's a bit of an impossibility to try and get there. The other big part, as part of the consultation, is that there in the top right here, there is a complete survey form here. This will bring out another drop box, the pop-out box, and this will allow you to pick a specific location on the map and drop a pin that allows you to say whether you agree with that particular mapped area, disagree with it, or if you have a particular comment, or if you think we've mapped a location as well. So you can use this smaller map here to pick your specific location. Just click on a site and then fill in the rest of the details here. The more details you give us in this, the more likely we are to use your information. If you just put I disagree here and you don't put any sort of rationale behind that, it's going to be really hard to take that sort of opinion into a consideration without any sort of rationale or backing behind it. So please do put some additional comments in. If you find you have dozens of comments or you have specific mapping available that you can't get in via this process, then do contact us directly and we can have that discussion. So that will be at the nature@surreycc.gov.uk. So yeah, that is available right now. In terms of how you access it, one of the easiest way is via our commonplace. So there'll be a link up to this in a second. This is where our sort of full survey consultation survey is held. And so on this box right at the top, it will take you to our survey page, and here are all of the LNRS documents for you to download. And so, as I say, there's part 1, part 2, and then there's a methodology statement if anyone really does want to read how we went through all the mapping. And then towards the bottom, there is the sort of questions. There's a core survey, and then there are specific questions. If you only want to answer questions around the farm and wider countryside section, you can just click on that. So we tried to split it out so you don't have to wade through pages and pages of information. It has the sort of key priorities. To view the full measures, you will have to go into the measures list because it just made this page sort of unwieldy and long. But the sort of core information that falls into that description of the strategy area does feature on this page too in drop-down boxes. And then the questions are literally at the bottom. And so for each, they're largely the same. To what extent do you agree with the priorities and measures that we set out? And are there any sort of additional comments or priorities or measures that you think we've missed? And please do add them in there. So that's the consultation page and the map itself. Just return to my presentation. So yeah, that is out. That is the link there. We will share that link to everyone who's come along, and that is available. The consultation is open until September 25th. Not quite done with you yet. This is probably one of the key pages. Maybe screenshot it. This does feature in the description of the strategy area. So this is just a direct lift out from that document. And this is what is the LNRS actually for, what it will do and what it does not do. And I think the big part for landowners the land managers really is what the LNRS does not do. So what the strategy itself does not do, it does not force, if you are mapped on that local habitat map, it does not mean that you will be forced to undertake the actions that are outlined. It is just a recommendation or suggestion that we would like nature recovery to occur in that location, and we think it would have the most benefit for nature. It does not create new designations or legal protection of sites, so that the LNRS doesn't do that. If you do undertake nature recovery work on your land and you end up with a absolutely flourishing wetland, I cannot promise at some point that someone will not come and designate your land, but the LNRS itself does not do that. So yeah, just a small caveat there. We naturally, and as part of that guidance, is we have not done any mapping into SSIs or existing designated sites. They have very much said the existing designated site network is their responsibility. It's up to them to deliver nature recovery in that area. So we have not there. If you are a SSI currently, or you're thinking, actually, this is a really important area for nature recovery, why is there nothing here? We specifically have been told not to map into designated sites. And also, finally, the LNRS does not in and of itself prevent development. So just because you feature in here, it does not mean you'll prevent it'll prevent development from happening on your land. However, so as mentioned earlier, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act and the Environment Act do say that local plans should have regard or take account of local nature recovery strategies in their development. There is a couple of paragraphs of guidance that have been provided to planning authorities, and the bits sort of keep it in bold there. And so they should consider when considering the LNRS how these should be reflected in their local plan, and consider what safeguarding will be appropriate to enable the proposed actions to be delivered. On speaking to the sort of local authorities, largely, if anything, if they do adopt particular bases, it will be similar policies to the biodiversity opportunity areas. So anyone who already features in one of those, you'll likely see no difference at all. But this is sort of being hammered out at the moment. There's only 4 published LNRSs at the moment, so I don't think there is any real cases yet of how these have been interpreted in the local plan yet. And obviously that's all being thrown into the air slightly with local government reorganisation. At some point in the next couple of years, Surrey will turn into either 2 or 3 unitary authorities, and there'll be new local plans developed at that point that will take account of the LNRS. And so obviously if there is policies that are made at that point, there will be another public consultation on those policies and then their interpretation of the LNRS. And so you'll be able to input and consult then too. So almost finished. Transition to delivery. There is a statutory requirement for us to produce the LNRS, but there is no statutory requirement for us to implement the LNRS. However, obviously that is a bit of a short-sighted, and working with DEFRA, they have provided additional funding for responsible authorities to transition into delivering the LNRS, and they've given us sort of 4 key points they want us to look at, and there's a lot of crossover in terms of the purposes and why the Nature Partnership exists. So we'll be working really closely with Lisa and colleagues moving forward in terms of adopting this and how we really start to deliver the LNRS over the next few years before we have to review it and do a new one. And then finally, as I say, public consultation is open. Please do go and have a look. Really, part 1, if you really do want to read it, it's great description of the strategy area, but I think the meat really is those priorities and measures in part 2, and obviously that interactive map. So please do go have a look, see if the land is mapped, and then if the information that we've got on that map is incorrect, please do let us know. As I say, we have amalgamated a whole host of different data sets from national and local and regional data sets, and we are aware that it's not perfect. And so do let us know if you see any particular areas. Also, if you have slightly different ideas around the sort of nature recovery, say your particular land has been mapped for the creation of semi-rich grassland, but actually you want to do something different, you were thinking about exploring wetlands, then do let us know, and we can see how that would fit in terms of the mapping and if we can make adjustments. So do go have a look. and have a think about that. Yeah, the consultation is open until the 25th September. And I think that is me done. Q&A. Over to you, Lisa and Sophie.
Would you like to ask that one?
Of course. What are the specific measurable targets for habitat creation and restoration within the LNRS, say for the next 5 to 10 years?
This is a great question. There has been a lot of discussion with DEFRA over this. So the LNRS itself does not have specific targets for habitat creation. Obviously, there is that national target of 500,000 hectares of habitat to be created, and we have asked for that target to be disaggregated to a county level to give us a sort of scale of ambition of what we should be looking at. There are different ways of doing that. Obviously, looking at sort of existing land and how it's used. So, and obviously existing baselines of habitat. So we don't really have a yardstick yet of what our targets are. What I'm imagining is when all the LNRSs get all the 48 get amalgamated together, if the sort of culminated land that we've all mapped doesn't meet that 500,000 hectare target, then they may come back and say, actually, we need to sort of review that and up it. But there's been a lot of conflicting message about whether we should be writing down specific targets for habitat types or not. Yeah, so it's not a particularly clear answer to that question, but the guidance we've got from Central has not been particularly clear on that either. But I'm still pushing for a disaggregated target for Surrey.
Thank you. I can actually see the next question. I've got a question from Pamela Lyman. It's an interesting one because I don't think, Adam, you'll be able to answer this, but I think there are people on this webinar who can. It says, have NFU and CLA contacted Surrey public farmers stroke landowners? So I'm assuming the question is to say, have the NFU and CLA contacted all their members about the LNRS? To which I think I can answer the CLA because yes, they have. And I think probably true for this NFU. Do either of the representatives wish to say anything? I know you're both.
Not sure if they'll be able to come off mute, but yes, yeah, they've both been involved in the.
I think we can unmute them.
Oh, brilliant! Crack on.
I can't actually. Can you unmute, Sophie? Because Lucy's got her hand up from the NFU.
With me.
Sorry, CLA, I apologise for that. Sorry.
Lucy, I have enabled your mic, I think.
Yeah, all good. All good.
On, yeah.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that we absolutely have engaged with our members throughout the last 2 years, I think. So ensuring that we're keeping people up to date, ensuring that there's links to all relevant information on the website, and the consultation was included in our e-news out to all members. So from our perspective, and I believe Polly at the NFU's perspective as well, then that's absolutely been done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And obviously that's happening on a regional process as well, and we're all at slightly different points as well. So Kent slightly ahead of us. They have gone through their public consultation already, and they'll be going hopefully to publication by November. West Sussex will be releasing their public consultation in the next month or so.
Okay, I've got another question here from George Frater. I hope I pronounced that correctly, George. Is there planned? I think there should be. Are there planned reviews of the LNRS mapping and recommendations once the strategy has been approved?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a whole data improvement schedule that I have, which we'll be working on. So one thing to say, although it will be working on improvements over the immediately from sort of day one, no changes will be made to the LNRS map following publication until that review period on 3 to 10 years. That's the sort of guidance we've got at the moment. So it is meant to remain static. There has been some discussion around that because we are all aware that there will probably be errors or improvements that we'll want to make. So that may change, but as it stands right now, the map itself will remain static until that point of review. So, but yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of improvements. One of which will be the emergence of the Space for Nature programme, which has been working over the past few years to improve the identification of habitat types across the county. That should hopefully sort of be fully delivered in the next year or so, which will allow us to improve that baselining again.
Well, just checking if we've got a second one from Clive. Okay, that's fine, in which case I have got it. Where Clive asks, what are the key indicators that will be used to monitor success of the LNRS to demonstrate its impact on nature recovery?
Definitely. So I think in terms of the way that we'll be monitoring and reviewing it, it will very much be a output focused monitoring. So we'll be looking at the actual actions that have been undertaken, but then it will be linked in heavily with the State of Nature report for Surrey. So that's a piece of work that Mike Waite, the Nature Partnership, and SWT have undertaken. That looks at the condition of our species across the county, but also the condition of our habitat. So that will sort of be, we're hoping will merge into using that as an overarching outcome framework, I guess. But in terms of the LNRS itself, it will very much be an output measured item, and that's something that we're looking at in terms of that transition to delivery. We're also looking at how we best undertake that in terms of gathering that information, because this isn't a delivery plan just for SEC, this is a delivery plan for everyone. So we'll be looking at delivery through environmental land management, delivery through private markets, delivery through biodiversity net gain, and how we can try and bring all of that together in one place, which is a data management Everest, really. So we'll see.
All right, I have another one from George Frater. There's been some talk of BNG being watered down in the future. Interesting. What will this mean for delivering the outcomes of the LNRS?
Yeah, it's a great point. So obviously there's been the small size consultation on BNG a month ago or so, and that will restrict demand for biodiversity net gain units if some of those proposals do get adopted, because it will restrict that sort of lower level. I think it's up to 9 properties wouldn't have to undertake BNG. But obviously with the LNRS, there's only that 15% uplift in terms of BNG that's the direct link, and so we will be exploring whatever delivery mechanisms we can as a partnership. So that'll be looking at things like private finance, but also looking at how using things like devolution and potential additional powers that may come as part of that, how we can use that funding from government and better targeting using the LNRS. So it's a bit of a worry, the BNG process at the moment, and so is the state of environmental land management schemes at the moment as well. But as government are doing, they're putting a lot of hope in private markets and private finance coming into the sector. So we'll be looking at that too, and working closely with the MBS team at SWT, Surrey Wildlife Trust as well.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't got any more questions. Were there any further questions? Okay, I take that as a no and say thank you to Adam, and thank you everybody for attending this webinar. And obviously, if you have any further questions once you go away, you know who to contact. You should have all the contact details. Okay, thank you very much.